This is Jane Low, and I'm at Raffles City here in Singapore. And with me today, I'm very pleased and very privileged to have Levi Gundert, all the way from United States, who is the CSO of Recorded Future, to join us today on today's podcast. So thank you so much, Levi, for your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, so Levi is going to be sharing with us on, threat intelligence in this era of AI. So Recorded Future, as I understand, does a lot of publications looking at the cyber threat landscape. And of course, you have quite a few that's been released recently, one of which is your annual report looking at the cyber threat landscape in 2023. So when it comes to threat intelligence and AI, I think some of our audience will be quite keen to know, to what extent has Gen AI transformed the production of such reports?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think Gen AI has so many applications, of course, and in our industry, we are using it to increase the velocity at which analysts are able to work and some of the work product and some of the reports that we put out. But at the same time, it's also putting a premium on humans and human brains, because as much as it can help sort of with report generation, at the same time, we still need analysts to sort of verify that what's being produced is true and accurate and is what we want to represent. So there's good things going on there, and then at the same time, the quote, good guys are using AI, but there's the other side too, which is bad actors and adversaries that are using generative AI as well. And so, like most technologies, right, it cuts both ways, and we're still sort of in the early days there, of how bad actors are starting to pick it up and use it as well.
Yeah, so you talk about how bad actors are using Gen AI as well, and I think two of your reports I believe you looked at two cyber threat groups, which one is called Complicate. The other one is called Emerald Divide. And they are using Gen AI, as I understand, in producing synthetic voice, in deepfakes. Can you just give us a glimpse of how they are using it and scaling their operations?
Yeah, it's really new frontiers for threat actors leveraging this technology. And I think we know that nation states are going to use it for influence operations, to influence public perception and public opinions. And they have been fairly effective at doing that over the last sort of 8 years, right, at different election cycles. But now that you have LLMs and AI available, it's, again, sort of increasing the volume and velocity of the content that they can produce. And so, whether it's Iran generating information operations, to meddle in domestic affairs in Israel, whether, Russia's doing it to try and win hearts and minds in terms of the conflict with Ukraine, China doing it, in relation to Taiwan. We know that, they're going to do that, but it has been sort of amazing to watch just how good the content is. They're generating professional content, making the content look like it's from a credible news source, standing up websites that look like credible news organizations. They're engaged in deepfakes, as you said, voice and video. And so there's a lot of social engineering going on with these technologies. And it's unfortunate because, like I said, the technology is incredible and has so many positive applications. But, these are the negative externalities that come with innovation, unfortunately.
So you talk about the velocity. So the threat actors are using it or exploiting it at a speed that is unseen before with the older versions of, I guess, AI technologies, because AI has been around for a while.
That's right. I think it's the advent of LLMs, right? And ChatGPT, of course, roughly 18 months ago sort of was the firing gun in this race, right? And now there's a lot more LLMs that are publicly available. And even though the LLMs have guardrails, we've now seen in the underground economy that there are all kinds of LLMs that bad actors will sell access to that don't have guardrails.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Fascinating.
Yeah.
All right.
So there's one, as an example, called Fraud GPT. And Fraud GPT is, as its name implies, literally developed to help threat actors improve, their efficacy in different fraud schemes.
So when it comes to technologies or frontier technologies, it's always a double-edged sword, as they call it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, taking the perspective from a cyber defender side, we are also using LLMs to track some of these movements of the threat actors. And when it comes to threat intelligence, there have been some discussions of how we are, as cyber defenders, are using it to scale our operations, as you briefly touched on earlier. And there have been some discussions about deploying LLMs towards first-level reverse engineering, using LLM to ingest architectural diagrams, flowcharts, and translate it to human sort of language. So what have you seen so far? What's the progress so far?
Yeah, I think we at Recorded Future, our analyst team, Insight Group, has seen some improvements and gains in terms of workflows, and a lot of that is the actual writing sometimes of just reports and being able to speed up content generation. I don't know that we're using it yet for reverse engineering, but I know that we do use it for code production sometimes, where analysts may need to generate a script in Python or something related to that, and an LLM will knock out 100 lines of Python with comments very quickly. And so there's all kinds of just incredible applications that help in the information security domain. I think LLMs are very helpful for analysts in the analyst workflow, but then if you think about sort of what's coming in the future, I think a lot of security is really about tracking change management, right? And so whether you think about patching vulnerabilities, or you think about adding servers, removing servers, monitoring the configuration of servers, this is where generative AI can be extremely helpful in the future. And it's never going to be perfect, but again, it's sort of about efficacy improvements, and I think we're really starting to see that.
Yeah, there were some discussions also about how LLMs can help with password changes and
Absolutely.
firewall configurations.
Absolutely.
And right,
Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to threat intel, right, there's had always been a concern about false positives, false negatives. How is LLM complicating that concern?
I think that's where I think we still have a premium on a human brain, because the LLMs are just not quite there yet. I mean, there are well-documented issues, hallucinations, right? If you're using a model where you don't have traceability, and you're unable to determine the origin of a piece of information, if you don't have source truth, it's very difficult to sort of rely on what the LLM's producing. So we've created an LLM actually inside the Recorded Future platform, and the thing that I love about working with it is it has traceability. So if it provides an answer to a query, I can always see in the footnotes where that answer originated, and that's really, really helpful, I think, for an analyst. So that's been great, but if you don't have traceability, it gets really difficult to rely on what's coming back.
Right. So I think earlier you used this phrase, the premium on the human brain, right? So I think others use an alternate phrase called human in the loop sort of intervention. So at what stage do you, or how do you apply, or how do you decide when to apply such an intervention in a cyber threat intelligence gathering sort of cycle?
I think we're figuring it out right now. I think
Right,
I
okay.
think it's very early days, and we are trying to do R&D, and we're still in that sort of learning phase, I think, of what are the capabilities. Obviously the models continue to improve, but what are the capabilities and what are the right applications? And I think we at Recorded Future, the analyst team themselves, I think, are still doing a lot of R&D to try and figure out the answers there.
And I got to ask you this question as well. You used the phrase hallucination, which is quite well known, right? But when it comes to threat intelligence gathering again, I think there is some advantage to having a model that hallucinates to a certain extent, because you want to be able to predict
That's true. Yeah, that's
potential
true.
threat events.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we talk about is the ability for organizations to move from intelligence to risk, and understanding that intelligence is a critical capability in informing risk and uncovering risk, especially for enterprises and large organizations. So in order to do that, you really have to engage in second order thinking, and sometimes non-obvious, right, second-order thinking. So you can work with an LLM, and the LLM will help you generate second-order sort of hypotheses. But it's hard to get an LLM to do anything that's not obvious, right? And so I think there is some benefit to your point with hallucinations. I mean, if it's sort of offering creativity in that second-order thinking process, there can be value in that for sure. I think you just have to be contextually aware of what you're trying to achieve.
Right. Yeah. You also wrote a book which is titled "The Risk Business," right?
I did. Yeah.
Where you also highlighted the fact that there's the classical sort of communication barrier between, IT professionals and the board. There needs to be more than beyond quantification. There needs to be a way to storytell.
That's right.
Right. So, do you think that LLMs will be of tremendous benefit in this case?
I think so. I think if we can train LLMs, if they're trained on the right data, and then they're trained on sort of the model in which we want to do storytelling in the right paradigm, I think it'll be extremely helpful. We were just talking about this earlier with a group of CISOs, that that really is the challenge in the security industry, is less sort of about doing the hands-on keyboard security work, and more about communicating with the business in terms of what's happening with risk at any given time. And I'm really fortunate in my role. I get to talk to sort of hundreds of CISOs over the last couple of years globally. And I think that's the number one challenge, right, is relating security to the business as a business enabler, but also helping governance bodies like the board of directors understand what risk is and what the risk impacts are from cyber at any given time. And that's challenging. That's just challenging. And to your point about storytelling, is sort of the, one of the world's, sort of oldest, professions in some ways, is just being able to tell stories, right? And so I think because this is such a new domain, we're still trying to figure out how to optimally do that. But I think as we sort of figure out, more of the scaffolding that supports storytelling, that builds confidence in governance bodies, really builds confidence in the plan and confidence in investments and resources and how we time those investments appropriately, we can absolutely train LLMs and sort of how we want to do that bridging and how we want to do that storytelling, and that's so important, so important.
You talk about training LLMs, and I think when it comes to security and LLM models and cyber threat intelligence data, right, there needs to be quite a strong focus on keeping what is sensitive data away, I guess, from different types of database that's used to train the LLMs. Can you talk a bit about some of the security concerns or factors, that additional ones compared to the traditional ones, that organizations need to think about when it comes to training LLMs?
Yeah, it's such a big topic, and I'm wading into the water here, but I'm definitely not an expert on training models. But I know that at Recorded Future we are very sensitive to just proprietary data, right? Like giving sensitive proprietary data to an LLM, just generally speaking, it's not a great idea, right? Because there's so much that happens on the back end in terms of neural networks, and we're talking about hallucinations. It's unlikely that a large LLM, will pull some mundane detail from some report you uploaded to the LLM in a future answer, but it's certainly possible, right? And so that becomes the worry. And I think from a regulatory and compliance perspective, you just need there's obviously technical solutions that are out there now to help ensure that organizations are not uploading sensitive proprietary data to their LLMs, and that's really important. But you also, I think, just need to be able to train your workforce that, yeah, that's important, but at the same time, we also want to maximize the capabilities of generative AI, and you don't want to limit your workforce, and you don't want to disenfranchise your workforce when there's a tool set that's incredibly helpful for them in their job function. So I think we just need to be careful to sort of balance the message, right? Which is, yes, we absolutely want to make every potential use and application of the technology to further, innovation, to further productivity. But at the same time, we also want to be careful and mindful that, there are sensitive proprietary data within the organization that we don't necessarily want an LLM to have free reign on.
There's also a distinction, I guess, between sort of open source LLM models and the ones that you develop in-house. I guess that there's a lot of discussions as well, how you apply security concerns and access to your supply chain in your LLM model development process as well, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a complicated topic. It's a very complicated topic. And I think even some of the biggest companies in the world, right, are rolling out LLMs and then realizing that they have to roll it back because they've made some mistakes in, the execution of how they roll these things out, and whether it's, bias in how they're trained in the data or, other things. It's complicated. Like, this is not
it's a
trivial.
It's a big topic. I think there's so many sort of attack scenarios that people have been discussing, like prompt injection, leaking of sensitive information using certain prompts. I think each attack vector deserves a separate podcast, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You could go deep on every single one of those. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I just have one last question to ask you, if I may, Levi. You have extensive experience also working in the public sector, working, with different government agencies. With the UK, I understand, serious organized fraud agency. You were with also the US Secret Service and as well as FBI. What are some of the lessons, important lessons that you can take from there and apply to the cyber arena?
So I think I was really fortunate to start my career with the U.S. Secret Service, and I realized back then that intelligence was so important because in cyber investigations, by the time somebody picks up the phone and calls you and says, I'm a victim of a cyber intrusion, it's generally too late. Right? It's very difficult because the artifacts in that particular investigation get stale very, very quickly. And it's very difficult to obtain the information you need in these investigations just because of the way legislation is written. And, in the United States, you have to go to a grand jury, you have to go to a judge, and you have to get, people, you got to write subpoenas and search warrants, and people have to sign off. And by the time, you get the authorization you need to go get the data, that case has sort of sailed. Right? It's very difficult to actually get to attribution and arrest someone. So I realized early on that intelligence is so fundamentally important, and that we say it all the time, sort of proactive, but being proactive and standing up intelligence operations allowed us to essentially identify threat actors long before they were actually committing the crimes. And so in some regards today, Recorded Future, we're doing something very similar, and I'm in the private sector now. But I think, our goal and our mission is really to bring intelligence to the private sector and organizations to help them uncover risk and also improve security. And I think, we were talking about this earlier, sort of if you do any sort of trading in financial instruments, foreign exchange, bonds, equities, whatever it may be, like you use sort of like a Bloomberg terminal because that's the business intelligence you need to make smart decisions. And Recorded Future is very much the same sort of dynamic inside of intelligence, right, for security and risk. And so that's really what we're building and what we're trying to do. And I think intelligence has never been more critical just in terms of the geopolitical landscape and what's happening globally, but also that convergence between geopolitical, physical, and cyber has never been closer in terms of just how they're operating in parallel. So I learned it all in the public sector, but now I'm in the private sector, and
you have a different perspective, I guess.
It's really been fun. It's really been quite an adventure to try and solve some of these bigger problems in the intelligence space for our clients.
Well, I did promise that it's going to be my last question, but
no, let's do one more. Let's do one more. Let's do that.
One more. I think in your 2023 annual report, you provided some predictions. Looking ahead, what do you think is going to happen? Right?
It's always dangerous doing that.
Yeah, I know. And obviously, the report was written before, I guess, a few months before. Every month there's a acceleration in terms of artificial intelligence and LLM capabilities. So, what do you think is the more urgent sort of thing that will emerge from the in the cyber threat landscape?
Yeah, I think so. It's hard to pick just one, but I will say, I think we've heard from a lot of our clients that the deepfake application, the applications of deepfakes is really accelerating, where a lot of employees are starting to receive phone calls from their alleged CEO, right? And it is the voice of the CEO, right? Or you have CFOs joining, Zoom calls, right? And it's the virtual instantiation of the CFO, right? Because you only need a little bit of voice, a little bit of video to be able to create these deepfakes. And I think some of what's coming is probably the democratization of these platforms that allow you to create these deepfakes, right? Right now, it's still a little tricky to do it well, right? To make it convincing. But I think it's only going to improve, and more threat actors are going to have access to these platforms. So the social engineering component of this, I think, is really going to ramp up, and it's going to be difficult for employees. Right now, the phone call may come from an unrecognized phone number, and that may be, one of the variables that throws it off. But I think we're hearing sort of across the board that social engineering efficacy is improving because the technology is getting better and better in the way that adversaries are using it. So it's always hard to go out on a limb and sort of prognosticate about what's coming, but that's one that is genuinely worrying, because you can try and train people and employees, right, to think through this, but especially if you work in accounts payable or something, right, that becomes really important. But yeah, that's probably the one that I'm most interested in watching.
Yeah, well, I think phishing has been around for decades, right? And we still find it quite challenging to train everyone on the latest techniques. So with deepfakes and synthetic voice, it's going to be even more challenging, isn't it?
Very challenging. Very, very challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd love if we have time next time, to drill into one of these threat actor groups behind these deepfakes and synthetic voice operations, and look at some of their techniques and what their motivations are, and what one of the motivations is obviously money, but there could be others as well. So to drill into, deep dive.
I think generally on the criminal side, it's mainly about fraud. It's mainly about committing fraud. But nation states are getting in the game too, as we talked about earlier, and they're looking to influence elections, right? They're looking to sow discord, and their goals and their ambitions are much broader. So that might even be scarier in some regards, right?
Yeah, and then you add in like virtual reality and I don't know, metaverse and blockchain and all that. It's going to be a collision of emerging technologies that threat actors will exploit. So very exciting times for all of us, not just for the cyber criminals and the nation-state actors, but also for the cyber defenders.
Yeah, agreed. It's a great space to work in because, as you know, I mean, every day is every day is something different. Every day is something new. There's constant innovation, which means constant opportunities on both sides. So it's a great field to work in.
Yeah, still an exciting cat and mouse game.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right, so on that note, thank you so much, Levi, for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you.